welcome to The Nation ASEAN Plus. You're with me, Jessie CHAHAL. As ASEAN gears up for Malaysia's chairmanship in 2025, the region faces numerous economic challenges as well as opportunities, from strengthening regional supply chains to empowering SMEs. ASEAN's future hinges on innovation, resilience and collaboration. Now, with a background in healthcare and economics, joining me in the studio today is DATUK Dr. KUMARARAJAH. He offers valuable insights into what lies ahead for ASEAN's macroeconomic landscape. Welcome, DATUK. As we jump right into this area of discussion, give us first a big picture of ASEAN's presence at this point and its economy.
So let's look at it from a demographic perspective, right? So ASEAN is like 680 million population. We do 3.6 trillion US dollars in terms of trade, and that puts us as the fifth largest trading bloc in the whole world. Now that 680 million population is probably about 8.5% in terms of the world population, right? So it is smaller compared to, say, now the regional things like CPTPP and RCEP and even BRICS that we want to be part of. But ASEAN is one of the only single region in the whole world. So OECD and World Bank has even in their recent reports have termed ASEAN as the only bright spot in an increasingly bleak world, because we are growing by 4.5 to 5% on an average, and that is kind of a mirror, or the proxy data to that is the kind of FDI that is coming. So even this year, as we speak, we have already crossed 220 billion US dollars in terms of foreign direct investments that have come in. So if you look at, and we have been a direct beneficiary of all the trade and regional geopolitical tensions that has happened, not only in this part of the world, but even, say, as far as the Middle East or the other side, even the Western world, between China and US, we are very much in that China plus one policy. So in that way, we have been a very good spot, and Malaysia coming into the ASEAN chair in 2025, taking over from Laos, would be a very good step for us. And being on the economic story, it is also the 10th year of after the ASEAN Economic Community was established back in 2015. So we take up the chair at the time when the theme itself would be economy.
So a crucial time indeed.
Yes.
And to underscore what you've just said as well, being the bright spot within the region here in Malaysia, definitely a sweet spot within that larger bright spot. What would you say are key priorities or focus areas for Malaysia particularly?
So again, you must look at it from a regional perspective or an ASEAN perspective, where SMEs account for a large portion. So if you take the numbers, they do speak about the SME numbers in ASEAN to be anywhere between 80 to 99%. So you take Malaysia, for example. So we use the number 98.5% loosely. But if you take many of these nations, even if you take our neighbors Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, they're all in the 95, 97, 99% in terms of the SMEs. But if you look at the impact or the footprint of this near all SMEs that they have on the economy, they're very differing. So in Malaysia, for example, the number of employment that is offered from SMEs is about half. About 7.5 million Malaysian workers work in the SME sector. But if you go to Singapore, it's 75%. If you go to Indonesia, it is 90%. So in many ways, that number is very, very different across the ASEAN things.
Okay, given that those numbers reflect quite differently from country to country within the ASEAN bloc, what would you say are some major economic themes that we should expect Malaysia to focus on during the chairmanship?
Certainly digital, and if you see YB Gomindino, I think just last week or earlier this week, while speaking on next big Asia Tech, spoke about that US 2.3 trillion digital trade that is happening in the ASEAN region. And definitely in terms of climate change, in terms of sustainability, in terms of bringing in back to the industry focus, to bring in back for green financing and access to financing. Again, like you said, look at what's happening in Singapore. Singapore is like a very vibrant place for startups, but Malaysia is slowly picking it up. We're still looking at the unicorn -1 sort of thing. So in many ways, these are the themes that will reverberate even back into 2025. But I certainly feel digital, the climate economy or the revolving economy, that will play a very central theme as we go into
with that in mind, and of course, with our eyes moving ahead, how can ASEAN collectively help to strengthen what we would say to be a regional supply chain in light of what's happening beyond ASEAN, so globally as well? How can we collectively come together to be that regional supply?
So you look at it from a diversification of supply chains. Right? So we have to look. So you must look at it how a foreign investor looks at. So he looks at where to invest in the whole world and says, look, okay, let's pick ASEAN or Southeast Asia. So in Southeast Asia, what's each country's strength? So what's our strength in terms of, say, the supply chain, in terms of connectivity, in terms of accessibility and affordability? In Singapore, efficiency. In say Indonesia, a very large population, local population demographics is very, very big. In Philippines is the English speaking population, so we have our strengths.
Right.
Vietnam is the next or currently the powerhouse of manufacturing in this part of the world. So in many ways, if we can integrate in that way, the ASEAN single window would play a very important role in trying to bring back this ASEAN theme in the economy, because we are known for different things. We have very strong supply chain.
How strong is the ASEAN brand?
Okay, so that's the thing. That's something which is, to me, not fully realized yet. That potential has not been realized yet fully. And for that, I think we have been slow in picking up. And I suppose it's nothing to do with by design, it's more by default. Because for a long time, we were growing very fast. Each individual country was growing very fast. And I think that growth kept the GDP moving forward. So we were quite comfortable doing what we're doing. But now we're looking for the next leap. I mean, even if you take PMX idea of Malaysia, Madani economic narrative, we need to grow at least 20% faster than what we're growing over the last 10 years. To grow, bring that incremental 20% every year to year until 2030, we need to find the next leap. You just cannot be evolutionary, you need to be revolutionary. And that revolution will only happen if you start looking at a demographic which is bigger than our 33 million.
But that also means that all wheels need to be well oiled and on the ground.
And well fitted.
And well fitted, good point. So in that aspect, what would you say is going to be a hurdle for ASEAN as we drill down individually, each country, but as ASEAN as well, coming together to face or to move forward while we try to balance growth and resilience, given again what's happening around us?
That answer to that question is more a lot more than economy, because here again we are trying to manage local sentiments against global interests. We are trying to manage China and still manage US in the same thing. So I think in that way, PMX, Malaysia has got a very important role or play in terms of 2025 when we start looking at bringing that ASEAN centrality back and look at the world which is not so much bipolar but a lot more multipolar. And the fact that ASEAN has always, I mean, last time we spoke about NAM, non-aligned movement, now we speak about the ASEAN centrality, and I think that's something that's really going to maneuver ourselves past the challenges that we have, because we have a very heterogeneous economy. We're not so much like the EU, where they have a single currency, for example. We don't even have a single currency. But we have very good interconnectivity. Intra-ASEAN trade is very, very high. We have got very good... We've got very we've got very good connectivity. We've got very good, very vibrant, what you call bilateral trade arrangements with us. So that has really able to move the needle. And I think if we work on those things, then we will work. What's one more thing that has not really been realized in the last 5-10 years? I realized one is this harmonization. Harmonizations across standards, harmonizations across, say, economic, export.
But how so? That's going to be quite an intricate job.
That's very hard to do. That's very hard to do. Simply, again, if you look at it from a numbers perspective, right? So while we speak about the GDP, if you look at the GDPs across the ASEAN 10 countries, we are comparable. $50 billion in Singapore, $40 billion in Thailand and Malaysia and even Indonesia, for example. But if you start looking at it from a per capita basis, Singapore is $90,000 per capita. Whereas on the bottom end, we have got the CML, the Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, which is about 2,000.
I thought you were going to say Malaysia there.
Yeah, so usually last time we used to put Vietnam there. So the Vietnam has moved to the next tier. $2,000 for Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, $4,000 for Vietnam, $7,000 for Indonesia, which is growing very, very fast because now they are the giant that is woken up. Thailand is about 7,000, Malaysia 12,000. So if you look at it even from that scale itself, we realize it's near impossible to get harmonization. So to me, I think it is better that we start looking at it from a cluster perspective and says, look, okay, so what is it that's really, to me, again, this is just my thought, I think that test case would be very, very good, because if you look at it from a Kalimantan or the Borneo country, so Indonesia is moving its capital to Kalimantan, which means there's huge amount of infrastructure growth. So the construction play, the infra play would come in there, and in that way, Sabah and Sarawak would be a big beneficiary to me. And Singapore has naturally, for some reason, has got, while they may not be geographically a lot more connected to the Borneo states, but I think in terms of vibrancy, in terms of economic connectivity, that channel seems to work faster than even the channels across the peninsula.
So you were suggesting sort of a reformat?
Yes, I would still think that ASEAN needs to cluster itself and says, look, what is it that we can do in the Borneos? What is it that we can do in Philippines? What is it that we can do in Cambodia, Myanmar?
So bring out the best and the strengths of each.
Play to the strength of each in that area, as opposed to trying to get a harmonization across per capita, which is, like it's like the distance between the Earth and the Moon.
We're a couple of months away from being the ASEAN chair.
4 months, yes.
So at this juncture then, and with that sort of, format in mind, where do you suggest the ship gets steered now? In which direction?
Right, so the ship is hard to steer, but we've got a very able captain in that. To me, I believe one of the strengths that Sri Anwar has got as a Prime Minister, while the debate is always there in terms of the local politics, but I think in terms of the international presence, in terms of being able to garner that level of confidence from his fellow rulers across the ASEAN nation, I think he's got strength, and that strength is very, very important for us to move forward.
Well, we take a quick breather. When we come back, we take a look at some strengths of ASEAN at this point, and we look at the SMEs and sustainability within the ASEAN economic growth, and some highlights there. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're with us right here on The Nation ASEAN Plus. We take a look at SMEs and sustainability in ASEAN's economic growth. Now, SMEs are the backbone of ASEAN's economy, but also sustainability is a crucial component or a critical component for future growth. And here now we take a look at how SMEs and sustainable initiatives will really help to drive ASEAN's development and keep us as a bloc at the forefront. So, Ati, how then can ASEAN better support SMEs within their transformation journeys? We are talking from infancy right up till it's full.
So we did touch on the startup ecosystem, right? So again, we'll have to look at where the banking systems are extremely robust, right? And very able to. So Singapore will be able to do that in a very traditional way. Malaysia is one of the fastest in terms of the Islamic financing. So Islamic financing is still the fastest growing sector, or the fastest growing line in terms of financing across the world. So we have got that strength. I think just that two alone would be able to deliver it for the startup ecosystem. But if you look at it from an SME perspective, we have got close to 70 million. In Malaysia, we've got 1.2. Across the ASEAN nation of 10, we have got 70 million SMEs. So this 70 million SMEs, the problems are same. It's just the size of the problem is very, very different. Access to financing, in terms of what you call capacity building, in terms of finding for the right talent and trained and skilled talent, that's really challenging. And in terms of market access, now the market access is well managed in many ways, because the ASEAN countries, like I mentioned, we have got like 14 FTAs across the world, and that participation both in CPTPP, RCEP, and we now looking forward to BRICS would be able to actually ensure that we have market access across the world. But when it comes to capacity building, I think again that's another place where ASEAN itself can probably play a better or a faster role, because capacity building is not so much of the infrastructure and superstructure, but it's also capacity building within the people. Retaining the kind of right talents in this region becomes very important, because most of these talents, if you see, just like how China and India is, they've already exported most of their talent out. It's only now that you realize they have, they need the domestic talent to actually move the economy. And in that ways, for a long time, we still speak about, even as a nation, we still speak about brain drain. I think that's something, while we can bring our best brains, keep them in the country, train them, upskill them, work on all these things about progressive wage models, things like that have already started moving. So to me, if these three things, access to financing, capacity building and human capital development, these three things will probably be the game changer for us, as not only as a nation but definitely as ASEAN.
Okay, now with SMEs playing such a large role here, how do you think it can further really enhance or drive economic growth when we look at innovation and R&D?
I think you got the answer there. Now, again, we, minus Singapore, I think have not really spent enough. We may have spent in terms of the dollar sign, but in terms of the investments that we make into the people, into the ecosystem of bringing innovation to the forefront, that's something we have not done. To me, we have not done enough, at least. If we can bring back innovation and sustainability to be part of this global integration that we speak about as ASEAN, then that's something that's really good.
Okay, so then answer this. How can ASEAN integrate sustainability into our economic growth when that can be driven by SMEs and SMEs alone?
So
that's
70 million SMEs across 10 nations, right? They have to deliver this sustainability story. But then again, what is the incentive to go green? Or what is the incentive to actually bring sustainability back into the practice? Because across the world, this is the current theme, right? Sustainability, green climate change.
Do we have a growth plan as a bloc? An ASEAN growth plan?
We don't have, right? So I'll give you a simple example. So now we speak about 90 odd, high capacity data centers being opened across Malaysia. 48 of them are already gone live, the rest are already in the pipeline. So 90, why is it that it's not in Singapore? Or simply because we have got relatively cheaper infrastructure, at least in terms of power and water. But is that true for the other parts of ASEAN? Not so much. So that integration, that innovation, that resilience, that capacity building, that's to bring everybody up to the same level. So it's not so much of an equality, but in terms of equity, like what we spoke about just now before the break, was to bring the best to our strength. So Singaporean companies that operate large say data centers in Malaysia are actually using that to sell services across the causeway. And that is something that we can do. So call centers being placed in Philippines simply because they have a population that speaks naturally English. While we have a very skilled people back in Malaysia, then we've got a very robust economy that surrounds Malaysia itself, and a low base economy in Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos. Myanmar being a political situation itself.
As you say this, one thing comes to mind, that ASEAN as a whole needs to remain healthy, not just economically, but health-wise as well. And from your experience, in healthcare, how would you suggest ASEAN try to balance healthcare investment with economic growth so that no one gets left behind?
Okay, so when it comes to healthcare, I think the debate has always been about, does governments invest enough into infrastructure, into people, into doctors, into practices, into accessibility to healthcare, and also is healthcare affordable and accessible across the ASEAN? Not so much. We've got a very differing picture, very heterogeneous picture in terms of, say, Malaysia. I would vouch that we've got one of the best healthcare systems in the world, if not ASEAN itself. Probably, but in Singapore, very efficient system, but relatively expensive, and it must be insurance backed. The other parts, we've got very strong hotspots, but again, we've got a lot of lack of investments that has not happened over the years. So that's one of the things that we can pivot, is to bring digitalization, and that digitalization of healthcare would probably help us pivot and not go through that evolutionary route in terms of investments, and then it will take years before we see those
so we can
returns.
Speed up that
to
process.
Me, yes, we can kind of collapse the timeline and actually pivot on to say, look, but that accessibility, like just a very clear, one of the success stories in this part of the world has been in India, how they have brought healthcare to the remotest part of India's, the remotest villages of India, in a large country, right? So in that way, I think ASEAN again can use that same methodology, that model, to allow that accessibility.
And where are you seeing that in areas where improvements can be done? You did say that here in Malaysia, as a nation as well, we are on the forefront of one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Where then are those gaps, or perhaps an opportunity for improvement?
One is again to also play on our strength in terms of medical tourism. I think that's something that we must work on. We have already done very well on those grounds. But if you look at it from ASEAN perspective, especially us becoming chair, I think again we must play that differentiated role. So when you look at ASEAN and you look at medical tourism, or even if you look at healthcare competencies, if you're looking at, say, for example, aesthetic beauty, for some reason Thailand comes up. If you're looking at it in terms of the cutting edge work that is being done at Singapore. If you're looking at affordability and accessibility, it's Malaysia. So in that way, if we can sell to each of our strengths, then it will be very, very well. I'll give you an example. The medical tourism that's happening in this part of the world, at least in Malaysia, one of the biggest areas is actually medical tourism related to infertility. So the world looks at it entirely from a different lens as opposed to how we look at it from inwardly. So to me, those are the areas, digitalization, that will able to help us pivot and to bring some sort of a harmonization. Again, RCEP, CPTPP has allowed some sort of cross-border movements in terms of services. So it will not stop from a hospital now setting up shop, say in Kuala Lumpur, or for us to start investing in Bangkok for that matter. But that again will probably bring that talent pool starting to move, and if we don't work on some level of harmonizations across ASEAN nations, then we will probably also lose our best people to some part of last time world, but now ASEAN.
What would you like to see come next year as we become chair, as the main takeaways or the objectives being achieved?
If you look at it from a government side, I think everybody is already busy trying to put in place all the plans and everything that happens when we take up the chair come next year. But what I would probably like to see is for us to achieve one or two main items in that year, and being ASEAN Economic Community 10 years roadmap or 10 years milestone, I think we want to achieve at least that level of harmonization across some economic activities. And if we can show that works, then if Myanmar takes it up in 2026, I think they can start working on it.
And what has been some of the feedback that you've heard or you've read about in terms of the excitement being built up for Malaysia as the chair?
From if you look at what's written outside of our country, it's basically what they think is like think local, act global. So they think that Malaysia is probably also pandering to a lot of the local politics. If we agree that the fact that politics is domestic, then we have actually pandered to the local politics in our positioning as far as, say, Palestine, in terms of our positioning against what's happening in, say, even Russia-Ukraine war. But then again, to look at it from an ASEAN perspective, I think we have a very, very good strength. And to me, if we can bring that ASEAN centrality back in fore, I think Datuk Sri Anwar has got a very good year ahead in 2025.
Well, thank you, A.T., for being in the studios with us and shedding light on some of the collective strategies and opportunities that lie ahead for us as we move forward in terms of being the ASEAN chair in just a couple of months, about 4 months to go. Well, this has been The Nation ASEAN Plus. Thanks for joining us. Do keep it locked on to Purnamad for more updates coming your way. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.